Time to look at the Heeresversuchsanstalt Kummersdorf, which means Army Research or Army Testing Facility, which was not only the home of the famous Mauspanzer, but also a key facility of the German army in both world wars, when it came to weapon development and testing. Generally, Kummersdorf and its various facilities are shrouded in mystery. Likely the most academic and elaborate work up to date is from Günther Nagel, and he notes about the Versuchsstelle Gotto, testing facility Gotto, that has underground facilities in various unidentified ruins. The only reliable information is that a wide range of research was carried out in this Gotto testing facility. This included nuclear physics, explosive research, and ballistic investigations, experiments with new types of explosives, fires, and fuels, as well as numerous other topics. Details are largely lacking. In that sense, the Maus is only a minor footnote, although a well-known one in the history of Kummersdorf. We will focus mainly on the expansion prior to World War II in this video, but Kummersdorf originated in the 19th century, and after the Second World War the Soviets had a base here as well, of which still very little is known according to the director of the local museum. So first off, the origin story. Shortly after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, the former shooting range in Tegel, which is nowadays part of Berlin, was too small for the weaponry at the time. The Prussian War Ministry therefore made the decision to relocate to the extensive Kummersdorf forest. As early as 1880, the first experimental battery thundered in the previously silent, secluded forests. Since that time, the new artillery firing range has been constantly expanded, extended, and used for various technical weapon projects. The first shooting range had a length of 12,000 meters and was 250 meters wide. It included 55 bulletproof observation posts. Although the area was at that point not completely off limits, the shooting range apparently crossed civilian roads. As such, they needed to be closed. To give you some numbers on how many shots were fired, whereas the Artillery Control Commission recorded 9,700 shots fired in 1872, this figure had risen to almost 27,000 by 1890 and 35,100 by 1908. In terms of personnel, around 300 soldiers and civilians served there in 1900. Before the First World War, basically all developments in artillery were tested at Kummersdorf. So smokeless powder, the German mortars called Minenwerfer, literally meaning mine thrower, and many more. Of course, this also included very heavy artillery, like 42 cm shells. Furthermore, the Imperial Navy also tested its guns at Kummersdorf. The test procedures included not only the measurements of ballistic data, but also the observation of the effect of the weapon. In order to research these as precisely as possible, a great deal of effort was put into reconstructing parts of fortresses as they were thought to be used by potential enemies. All kinds of tests were performed with explosive charges and without. For instance, to test how deep a projectile could penetrate into the earth. Needless to say, there were also various accidents. The facility was connected with railways to Berlin. These were constructed by railway troops, which created their own facility in this area. Here, they trained on the construction of railways, bridges, and of course the destruction as well. Furthermore, they constructed their own training railways as well. The outbreak of the First World War led to a short decline of the facility, likely due to the belief that the war would be over by Christmas. The Prussian Ministry of War had initially decided to suspend the test operation completely and even dissolve the Artillery Testing Commission's examination office. But with the duration of the war, the need for new development and tests increased again, especially since the war had taken on a completely new form since autumn 1914 with the transition to positional warfare. Probably one of the most important tests that was conducted during the First World War when the famous Stahlhelm was tested in November 1915, with various other helmets as well. The result and many more aspects are discussed in my Stahlhelm video on my main channel. Also be aware that if you speak German, the German Panzermuseum Münster did an extensive series on the Stahlhelm as well. Other important activities during the First World War were the testing of captured weapons, researching various substitute materials due to the shortage of resources, developing new explosives. Furthermore, a second shooting range was created that had a length of 7,500 meters. Although the focus of experimental operation remained on artillery, structures were also created for other technical areas. For example, the military tested new communications technology and the light and sound measurements method that are particularly important for artillery tactics. With the defeat of the German Empire in November 1918, operations in Kummersdorf came to a standstill for the time being. Since the Treaty of Versailles forbade aircraft, tanks, submarines and also heavy artillery, Kummersdorf had to operate basically with a skeleton crew. Additionally, all the weapons, captured weapons, artillery from the historical collection were taken or demilitarized. Only 13 guns remained to continue weapons tests. Furthermore, until 1927 the Inter-Allied Military Commission regularly inspected Kummersdorf. Another issue was that due to the economic situation, a lot of people tried to get their hands on the material in the area. This led, according to some sources, to 100 dead and wounded by accidents. It is important to note here that the area even today is highly contaminated with darts, unused ammunition and other material. Quite regularly new stocks of explosives are found as well. In 1924-25 the testing was finally resolved. In the following years new weapons were developed, like the 37mm anti-tank gun, the light infantry support gun, which I discussed with Jens Wehner in this video, and also the heavy field howitzer 18, which was a crucial element of the artillery regiments in the infantry divisions. In 1926 the testing agency facility for motor vehicles was created, which led to the construction of repair shops, test tracks and similar facilities. Although forbidden, there was also some tank development ongoing, which of course had cover names, most notably the Leichttraktor and Großtraktor, meaning light tractor and large tractor. Although proper testing of these agricultural vehicles was not possible in Germany due to the Versailles Treaty, yet before 1933 there was a cooperation with the Red Army, and these vehicles were tested in Kazan. For more information, check out my video on how Germans cheated the Versailles Treaty. In 1933 this cooperation ended, and usually this is explained solely with ideological differences, yet I think this might be too simplified, as these authors point out. The end of the facilities in the Soviet Union did not come in 1933 for ideological reasons alone. Rather, the German side was now quite simply no longer dependent on extensive testing abroad. For me this argument makes far more sense because, let's face it, shipping tanks, personnel and all the other stuff to the Soviet Union to test them seems rather unnecessarily complicated, even by German standards. Additionally, it also delayed everything. Remember, it took years for most Panzers to be ready for production. But Panzers were clearly not the only weapon developed at Kummersdorf. Already in 1929 research for rockets began as well, which led to the establishment of facilities in 1932 in Kummersdorf. Here, Werner von Braun and others did basic research and testing on liquid fuel rockets. So as you can see, research in Kummersdorf was done even before the Nazis took over. Yet as you can imagine, there was a lot more to come. So let us look at the time from 1933 to the beginning of the Second World War in Europe in 1939. The Wehrmacht, which came into existence from 1933 onwards, found the best conditions in Kummersdorf for fulfilling the tasks set by the Hitler government. The dictator insisted on inspecting the experimental area with a large entourage as early as September 21, 1933. After that, money flowed. A lot of money. The Army High Command bought additional land in Kummersdorf Forest, invested in new buildings and facilities, and expanded the experimental area qualitatively and quantitatively to a previously unknown extent. In the Kummersdorf area there was a railway network that had been discontinued after the First World War. It was now reactivated. Kummersdorf and nearby facilities were expanded. For instance, a bigger testing facility for motor vehicles was created at Horstwalde. Since Hitler was generally technically interested and also interfered with weapons development as well, various demonstrations of weapons were held in Kummersdorf that were attended by Hitler. One example was Guderian in 1933 showing Hitler early Panzers. The expansion of the German Reich during peacetime also produced various captured equipment, especially from Czechoslovakia and Austria. Military significant were mainly two medium tank types of the Czech company Škoda, which were further used in the Wehrmacht under the designation Panzer 35T and 38T. The testing of armored vehicles was carried out in close connection with the newly founded Tank Troop School in Wunstorf. The efforts in tank and motorization testing and research led to the construction of an expanded facility nearby in Horstwalde, yet other areas were expanded as well. As mentioned earlier, rocket science was initially conducted in Kummersdorf, yet the range of some weapons and also security led to the construction of a more remote research facility like the famous Peenemünde station, which is well known for the A4 or usually called V2 rocket. The outbreak of the war not only increased the amount of captured weapons and thus tested, but it also increased the range of testing. For instance, about the influence of weather, especially cold due to the invasion of the Soviet Union. Now, the decisive factors were no longer just caliber, engine power and armor, but also the adaptation of man and technology to sometimes extreme environmental conditions. For this purpose, climate and dust chambers were built in Kummersdorf. Test teams carried out cold tests in Norway and heat and dust tests in North Africa. Similarly, during my visits to the archives, I came across a late war order for testing the Panther G in the Alpine region of Austria, namely St. Johann in Tyrol. This order was given by the testing agency for motorization located in Horstwalde. Probably the best known facility in Kummersdorf was the Panzerhalle, tank hall, of the super heavy tank Maus. Sadly, we could not inspect this building during our visit, yet from what I was told, this ramp was used to move the Maus onto the special rail car used for its transportation. Also, if some sites might look familiar to you, there are some famous photos of Hitler and others near various important buildings as well. Yet Kummersdorf did not only see ballistic tests, penetration tests or driving tests of tanks in development, but also more unconventional research like the German nuclear project at the experimentation site Gotto. The final days of Kummersdorf as a German research site came in April 1945, as it was conquered by the Soviets. Yet since Kummersdorf was located on the route of the 9th Army that wanted to break out of the Halbe pocket, the fighting erupted again. But this was not the end. After the war ended, the Red Army established a strong garrison in Kummersdorf, near Sperrenberg, in east-west direction. They built the runways of an airfield whose proximity to the headquarters of the Soviet High Command in Wunstorf unmistakably indicated its purpose. Only in 1994 the last former Soviet troops left. Today Kummersdorf is still a major mystery in many regards. There are several areas we know next to nothing about. As mentioned, Günter Nagel's work is likely the most serious on this topic. We already mentioned the testing facility Gotto in the intro, but that was just one example. Another testing facility is known by name, but has not been reliably located yet, according to Nagel in 2012. This is Testing Facility N, whereas N was an abbreviation of Nachrichten, literally translated with messages, yet more meaningful would be signals in this case. Its location cannot be determined exactly. With high probability it was located near the steel lattice towers, which are still visible from afar today, on the road between Kummersdorf Gut and Schönefeld. Many answers about Kummersdorf might be located in Soviet archives, but the Germans at the end of the war also destroyed many documents. Yet the Soviets created a special commission in February 1945 to gather German research and development, and the facility and equipment fell into Soviet hands. A report from August 1945 notes that all equipment of interest was shipped to the Soviet Union. Only equipment and ammunition of no interest was left. What documents and secrets the Soviet trophy hunters captured in Kummersdorf as a whole, especially at Gotto, East, N and West test sites, is not yet known in detail. The Russian archives are still silent on this matter. Big thank you here to Norbert, Ralf and their colleagues for welcoming us in Kummersdorf. Also a big thank you to Malte for sending me the book by Günter Nagel. Special thanks to Mirko for great company and motorization. Thanks to Andrew for reviewing the script. Also thank you to all my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar. As always, sources are listed in the description. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching and see you next time.